Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for joining myself, Angi Chasensky, and Angelyca Adcock, and tuning into our ROSC YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe if you have yet to do that. Today we just want to have an organic conversation about our family life, what it was like growing up in our different family dynamics, and how it's impacted us both professionally and personally.
So do you want me to ask you a question first?
Sure.
Did anyone in your family struggle with addiction or mental health problems while you were growing up?
I would say at the time, I wasn't aware of them struggling overtly, mentally at least, but physically my mother was a waitress raising 3 kids on her own. And, she would get involved with the party scene because she had my sister when she was 18. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of more of a forced union, I would say, with her high school boyfriend. She was raised in a Catholic family, mm-hmm. and she became pregnant when she turned 18. And so, the grandparents and everyone highly encouraged her to get married. And when she did that, she knew she wasn't marrying someone that she loved. And so I think there was some resentment there. Mm-hmm. So she had my sister when she was 18, my brother 2 years later, and then me 2 years later at 22. And then from my recollection, I believe she left my sister and brother's father when I was 3 years old. And so from there, she decided to kind of, start living life on her own terms. And again, a waitress raising 3 kids on her own, mm-hmm. lived in government housing. She was very much involved with the party lifestyle. My sister and brother ideally were supposed to watch me. Yeah. But that was very interesting because they didn't really watch me. They tortured me, terrorized me. Mm-hmm. And so I would say since I was about 5 years old, I was pretty much on my own while my mother sowed her wild oats. Mm-hmm. And, there would be people over partying, drinking, doing drugs, things along those lines. And I just remember as a child, there wasn't a lot of boundaries and there wasn't a lot of mm-hmm. rules besides clean this before I get home. Yeah. Kind of thing. There wasn't a lot of, right. And the structure was again, the cleaning, but it wasn't, even school, I don't remember at an early age, a lot of encouragement mm-hmm. or things along those lines. And there's no bitterness or resentment towards my mother. I think she was a kid having kids. For sure. And, mm-hmm. In her own family dynamic, she learned and grew and developed differently. And, mm-hmm. I recognize that as a woman, she was trying to do the best she could. So what about you?
Well, my parents were together basically most of my adolescence. They finally separated when I was in my early 20s, which was about 3 to 4 years ago. And my dad was a heavy drinker during most of my life, but specifically his worst time was when I was in high school. That's when it got really bad. I feel like mental health and addiction has always been pretty prevalent in my family. I guess I didn't know that I had my own mental health issues until later in life, just because my dad was an alcoholic and that was always given a lot of attention. And then my sisters started developing a lot more problems. So I think personally, my mental health stuff kind of flew under the radar for a lot of years, just because I don't want to say I'm more resilient than my sisters, but maybe their problems were more severe at the moment. My sisters struggled with having an addiction to shoplifting, and one of them had a binge eating disorder, or all the bad attention was always on my dad's addiction. And then I have twin sisters that are younger than me. Okay. So they always had issues. So I didn't start thinking about my own mental health until I was starting to go on my own, and I was I can't function. I don't know. I'm my friends aren't going through the same things as I do, so maybe there's something going on in my own head.
And it's almost their disruptive behavior was so loud in a sense that mother's attention is whoa, and you're okay, I'm just gonna fly under the radar. Yeah, exactly. And whatever you had, maybe even as a child, you're thinking it's mm-hmm. not as bad as that, or it's not that bad, or mm-hmm. you know what, I'm just gonna kind of go with the flow. Yeah. And I could relate to a lot of that mentality as well, because my sister, she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder when she was 15, mm-hmm. and so I was 11. But growing up, the same thing. A lot of she and my mother were like oil and water. Yeah. So there's a lot of fighting in general. For sure. And I think that stems from not only their personality differences, but also there was some different traumas that happen in the family. That, since that's my sister's story, I'm not going to go too much into that.
Yeah.
But that definitely added some layers of, I would say, some barriers between them, and like authentically connecting and really even growing together, and it still impacts them to this day. And so with that, I can, like I said, relate. And you said that your parents were together until your early 20s.
Yeah, I mean, they were together basically only from financial stuff. It's not like
Right.
the relationship had like no love for probably like the last 10 years. So it was just kind of more like a weird partnership of them being together. So it wasn't like it was a healthy relationship.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I know we decided, like, when we were going to have this conversation, we're coming in this not scripted. We're just going to let the conversation go where it goes. And so with you saying that, that's a big reason why I'm in my current situation. That your parents they were together, but it was more, out of,
We have to be together.
we have to be together.
Yeah.
And I found myself in a marriage. We were together just recently for 11 years. We're still together, but I did move out at the beginning of May because we had grown differently. We had different values.
For sure.
I'm on a sobriety recovery path. And when we got together 11 years ago, we were both very much involved in a party lifestyle, very reliant on alcohol. And I don't think we ever really got a chance to get to know each other and become each other's like best friend.
Yeah, for sure.
And the way to like build that trust and respect and that team mentality that a marriage needs.
Yeah.
And so he was still involved with his pathway, and so finally, kind of to that point, I didn't want my girls to continue to be raised in an environment where it's like my parents are together out of necessity.
Yeah, they're together, but they're not together.
Right, and there's a lot of fighting. And I wouldn't even say like there wasn't a lot of yelling, but you could feel the tension when you'd come into the house. It's like, okay, mommy's sleeping downstairs every night for like 2 years. And we don't do family functions too much. So, and that's not healthy. It's not a healthy environment for anyone in the family. And also, I didn't want my girls to have that, because I have a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old. I didn't want them to grow up thinking to settle. And, and especially when I say that, I know there's trials and tribulations in any marriage. And I know it takes the whole family, a cohesive unit, to work through the trials and tribulations. But that was just it. My husband and I's values were not congruent anymore. And so for us to be on the same page, I would have had to start drinking again.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to do that. And he had not found the motivation yet to make those changes. So I don't want to say like never to settle. It's not that. You work through things as long as you're not settling on your peace and your own mental health and your self-care in the process. And that's the message I really wanted to send to them, not only telling them, but by action.
Well, I've seen my parents be together through my whole adolescence, so I think I've probably experienced what you don't want your kids to experience. So, like, I've always seen my dad's been an alcoholic, so, like I've already mentioned, like 17 times. So my mom was an enabler, and she was really codependent on him, so I picked up on a lot of her tendencies. So now when I tend to be in relationships, like I get that codependency thing. Like no one I've ever been with has been an addict or ever used any substances heavily, but like it's still, I find myself being like emotionally codependent to my partners. Like if I think my partner's upset, then like I will try to do everything so I know he's happy. Yes. Or like try to like avoid him forever being in a bad mood. So it just makes me like kind of always trying to control things. Because I want some sort of peace in my life.
And Angelyca, that really even resonates along with my story as well. We're spirit animals, we say a lot. Not to diminish what you shared about yours, and I'm not trying to take away from what you experienced, what you went through. But some of those words that you shared really ignited some feelings in me, like control. And even going back to before, like I would keep some of my insecurities and fears and things I was going through as a child under the raptures, because my sister was very overt with her behaviors. And my brother, he was very, very quiet out to the side, and he was battling with his own personal identity things that you know society was not ready to embrace.
For
you know,
sure.
at a very early age, I knew he did too, that he knew he, you know, identified as being a gay man, and that was not nearly as accepted as it is today.
Yeah.
So he had his own social, emotional, psychological levels and experiences of his that he was trying to cycle through. And then here I am. I'm like, okay, I'm just trying to not create waves. And I remember growing up to control my environment. So one of the first circumstances after my mother and father divorced, who I thought was my father, he would call my sister and brother at holidays, and they'd go visit him, but he would never want to talk to me. He would send them Christmas presents, birthday presents. He would never send me anything. And so I found out when I was 18 that I had a different father. And so, but until then, I'm growing up, and the only thing I could control was school. So I was excelled in school. I couldn't control my family. My mom was still working all the time up until I probably went to college. She was doing that. So not a lot of hands-on.
For sure.
When I think about now, family vacations, I remember going to Indiana Beach a few times, but nothing really stands out.
Yeah.
I remember, much to like what you're feeling and what you're sharing, please correct me if I'm wrong, is that just trying to control my environment, because I know I felt just bad inside and I couldn't put a name to it. And there wasn't anyone I could turn to.
Yeah.
And it was so hard and frustrating. And so then I turned to my friends, and there was drugs and alcohol, and that just escalated, because not only did that, you know, numb me, but it pushed down a lot of things. One, couldn't put a name to it. I just know it didn't feel good.
Yeah.
And two, there's nothing I could do about it. So I was like, well, what am I supposed to do? So I wanted to push it down. So I'm like, okay, let's numb myself. And to have control, I stumbled upon bulimia when I was 19. And so that was almost liberating, because then I found a silent addiction that it didn't hurt anyone.
Yeah, just you.
Right. And at the same time, I could do it and then feel good afterwards and not, you know, gain weight, you know, the whole nine yards. So food was my control, or my response to when I couldn't control my environment, which I know now it's a figment of my imagination to think I can control my environment. But I'm 43, and it's taken many years to come to that conclusion.
Yeah. What's interesting that you bring up control, because like, now I'm trying to figure out how to have like healthy control instead of like trying to control others. Like I want to control my own emotions, which is setting boundaries, and that's been really hard for me, because like a lot of my family tend to like have like emotion vomit on me, because that's how I've been my whole life. Like they can come to me for everything.
Right.
But now as a 24-year-old, I'm starting to learn like I don't have to be that to people. Like I can be like, I don't want to talk to you, or I don't want to talk about this. Like, so it's just interesting how like we could have controls in some parts of our lives, but not all of them. And control can be good, but it also can be really unhealthy.
And to break even that identity that you've identified with, like you said, like, you know, your
the
family
helper.
has, the helper and enabler maybe,
Yeah.
or with, you know, things along those lines. But it's also with those boundary setting, it's like that's been a part of your identity for so long, and you want to change that, but it's like, how do you change those rules of engagement?
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you like tell your family, like,
I don't
no.
know. You tell me.
I know, exactly. It's like logically, I know I don't want to do this anymore, and I know this isn't healthy. So it's like, it's great you have that awareness. You're like, oh, the next part. How do I implement that in life?
Very hard.
Yesterday was actually 2 years sobriety for myself. Free from
Congratulations.
alcohol. Thank you. And that's something I'm still working on, is I can set the boundaries, and I'm really good at the follow through
That's
when
awesome.
it comes to like commitments, you know, both professionally, even, you know, family, like, okay, we could do this, and having a good balance. But some of those boundaries for myself, and that's really more so how I perceive myself. That's been a work in progress, again, for a couple of years.
Like building self-esteem and confidence.
That's exactly it, because I never had that as a child, because I never was really encouraged. And, you know, and if I was, it wasn't encouraged for good things. Or I wasn't asked to do things because of my abilities or skills. It was like, Angie, do this. Or, you know, out of necessity or neglect.
Chores,
And so that value for myself and the self-efficacy, the belief in myself that I could do things, I still don't have that. I have so much self-doubt, and it's funny for even me to be authentic like this in this capacity. It's even, I can feel my heart beating a little bit faster.
Yeah.
Because it's hard, because it's like,
it's hard to
I'm
admit.
wrong.
Yeah.
And just putting out there that and I wouldn't say all my self-narratives, my conversations in my mind aren't always negative, but it's always that doubt, like, okay, what do I do here? Or overthinking. I have a lot of anxiety, so I found that out through treatment, that my self-medication or self-medicating with alcohol and drugs and bulimia was I have some anxiety, underlying anxiety.
Yeah.
Understandable. Right? And some codependency issues. That's another, buzzword that we've had. And it's so hard because I think not having that love and affection early on, I became a people pleaser.
Yeah, because you just wanted that attention to get it some way or another.
That external validation. And especially not having my father, who I thought was my father, showing love or affection. And when you're a kid developing, already missing all these other, strong, solid foundational network pieces. Yeah. Man, there's a lot that can seep into those cracks. Yeah. And leaving a child up to their own devices in survivor mode, you find those things. And so kind of bringing it full circle to where we both are in our development, reconstructing those boundaries and defining those, rules of engagement for ourselves, with ourselves. We spent our adulthood getting over our childhood.
I definitely agree with that. What is one positive thing that you could take from your childhood?
One positive thing I could take from my childhood is, I will say my mother, going back to the first point, that she was engaging, she was a kid having kids, but she loved us the way that she could love us. Yeah. And I remember the way that she would, spend time with us is we'd read books together in bed. Aww. And then, she got me, I loved Christopher Pike when I was a child, kind of some V.C. Andrews and some other things, and she would ask me about it. And it felt so good.
Like she cared, yeah.
And she genuinely cared. And I was just going to say, like, how people ask you, like, how was your day?
Yeah, it's just like, whatever.
How was your day? And it was like that whole, inflection of tone, and like you could feel that you really care. Yeah. And I try to model that even in this day and age. Like I try to, separate myself from myself when I'm talking to someone, even as I'm talking to you now. I'm really trying to absorb where you're at and how you're seeing your own experience, kind of a thing. And I learned that from my childhood.
And I always know, like, whenever I have conversations with you, like, you actually care. Like, you're not one of the... I do. Yeah. Which is always nice to have, because not everyone actually cares, even if they pretend.
Right? Yeah. They're bad fakers, right?
Yeah. I guess from my childhood, even with everything going on, my parents were always very supportive with, like, self-expression. Like, me and my sisters are really creative people. We've always taken so many art classes and experimented with style and different hair colors and styles. That's awesome. And that's definitely still in my adult life, because I'm covered with tattoos, and
I love it.
And Angie can vouch for me that I change my hair probably way too often, but that's just something I really value about my childhood, and a lesson that my parents have really brought through me.
And that's incredible. So they encourage you to have your own identity, to really nurture your creativity. Yeah. That's awesome. And I can attest to your creativity, not only your beautiful ink on you, but this beautiful ring too. I love it. But anyways, what is something, a positive, keep you on the positivities, a positive message that you like to leave everyone?
We were talking about this earlier, and I know it's probably like really hard to hear, especially when there is so much violence and everything going on, but I believe that everything happens for a reason, and even if horrible things are going on, it might just be part of the journey, it might be a learning lesson, or it can be something that you can help other people with in the future.
I like that.
What about you?
That. And I would say too, a side extension of that is that we can't control the people, places, or things that are constantly moving in our lives. But we could really try to develop empathetic, I would say, perception on our own environment and try to control that control word, or try to at least observe things from an empathetic viewpoint and control our reaction to our environment. And yes, I do say control.
I always tell my boyfriend, you can't change what you can't control. So sometimes you just have to let things be.
Yes, yes.
Which is hard, but I still say it.
And on top of that, it's not necessarily always happening to you. It may be happening in general, but it's not always happening to you. So with that being said, we manifest positive energy in your lives, wherever you may be in your lives and in your journey. And stay tuned for the next video. Maybe we'll give some tips on how to apply these to your life.
Maybe a good boundaries video.
Yeah, maybe we'll do a good boundaries video. I don't know. Why don't you let us know what you'd like to see? And don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel.
Thanks for watching.